Hello and welcome to another episode of the Our Foundations podcast. My name is Joshua. I am your host, and today's episode will be the second talk from Agora Fest 2023. This is another one where the audio was far from ideal. I did clean it up a whole lot, and I think I got it cleaner than last one. So did get some feedback that the last one still was pretty rough. So this one I spent a little more time on, but at the same time, I'm not a professional and there is only so much I can do with my software. So I am getting it as good as I know how to, and that's about all I can do. A lot of it was just that the audio, when it was recorded at the source, just didn't really go well. Now, I will say that if this one is still not up to par, at least not even good enough where you can muddle through it, then have patience. Either the next one or the one after next, we switched how we did the audio, and the last few are much better. I think that especially if I do a little work on them, I think they will actually be pretty good quality, whereas these first few are pretty rough. But I felt like the content is really good. The one that Bradley gave, the presentation he gave that I aired in the last episode, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was really good content. I felt like the content in this one that I gave about the parallel society is really applicable, and it was really good info and condensed very well, and so I thought it was definitely worth presenting. Same with the next one. However, I do understand that the audio quality is not great, so I apologize again, and I promise that after maybe this one or the next, somewhere around there, they do get much better. There's only, I think, 3 more after this one in this current episode, and then we will get back to the normal episodes, getting back into, I believe, the end of the Beatitudes and the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, if I remember correctly where we are. So that's what's coming up. I will leave it here, and I'll just pick up with when I walked up on stage after Bradley was done with his presentation and got us started again for this presentation number 2 from Agora Fest 2023.
So, we're going to continue on here. Brad talked about mutual assistance groups, getting to know like-minded folks, gathering together, so definitely good to talk to various people in this room because they're going to be in that circle, on that list. So networking is always one of the most beneficial aspects about something like this. Brad did also mention the Chattanooga Voluntary Society. So if you're looking for something of that sort in the greater Chattanooga area, that'd be the place to go. And ChattanoogaVoluntarySociety.com would be the website. You can talk to me or anyone at the Agora, or probably, I don't know, work with people in this room and find out more about it. And that's basically a group of like-minded folks within an hour of Chattanooga roughly that meet up once a month and then have lots of other things that we do. So if you're interested, check that out as well. So also, if you've looked at the schedule, you can tell that we're not going to follow it exactly because it's nowhere near whatever time it's supposed to be. So we'll do the best we can. Sometimes it's nice to have a little longer break, walk around, talk, do the things, rather than try to be exact. So for me, I am the next speaker talking about the parallel society. So this is kind of putting into practice what Brad was referring to about actually taking action, actually doing something, building something. And it's more than just friends and like-minded folks that hang out. There can be a lot more than that. And so what I want to talk about is this idea of what is a parallel society, why is that something that would be worth considering doing, and how would you go about doing so, what are some examples, these kinds of things. So, similar to Brad, I guess we'll start off with, there's problems in the world. I don't think I even need to ask you to raise your hand, but I think we can all agree that there are problems with today's culture. Lots of things that lots of people don't agree with. Politics, maybe some corruption going on, and lots of other things. Even corporations. I'm sure there are things that various corporations do that everybody in this room can find one that does something they don't agree with. There's lots of problems in the world today, period. It's all around. That's modern society. So the next step would be, well, what are the solutions? And so there are a few ways you could approach this, theoretically. You could try to fight the system. And you could go all the way from start a militia to join a protest. There are all different ways that you can try to fight the system and stick it to the man, do these kinds of things. That's an option. That's not my option, but that's an option. Another option would be to try to reform the system. So a lot of people would say that you should vote really hard, and if you vote hard enough, you can make good change and change the system, which can, again, have some effect. That is one option. Some people would say you join the system, reform it from the inside. So you've got what I think most of us could probably agree that there are some good people that have gotten involved with politics. Maybe a congressman, a senator. You've got, let's see, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey. You've got some folks that are very liberty-minded, very good people, Ron Paul. And so there are definitely people that go that route and do have some effect. So reform is a legitimate option. The other option would be to exit the system. And that could look very different depending on how far you go with that. But the parallel society approach is more in line with that option. Instead of trying to fight the system, instead of trying to reform the system, what about just operating outside of the system? Stepping outside of the system that is largely corrupt, that is very inefficient, often ineffective at least the things that we think the system should do. So that would be our approach at the Agora. It's my approach. That's what this talks about. And it doesn't necessarily mean you give up on everything else. There are people that are still very interested in reforming local regulations and things. That can be a good thing. Joining a school board and maybe having some impact on the public education system. That can be a good thing. Sometimes protest can be a good thing. You can do whatever you want. But in my opinion, at least, we'll get into this, one of the most effective, one of the most efficient, one of the most moral options, I would argue the most, would be the parallel society approach. So I was kind of thinking of examples of things that are wrong in society, and heard a few things, I guess, yesterday. And so just want to call out just a few of these that 5 years ago even, definitely 10 years ago, would have sounded absolutely crazy. So just a few weeks ago, it was announced that 2 of the hijackers for the 9/11 attacks were CIA assets in conjunction with Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure some people in here have gone down that rabbit hole, and that's probably not a surprise. But that is actually admitted in the normal announcement that was on the news. Another one would be that recently came out that almost guaranteed, I don't think they 100% admitted it, but that the CIA pretty much killed Kennedy. That, again, is probably not a huge surprise to a lot of people in here, but the fact that that's just on normal news, and that's now common knowledge, that's not a crazy conspiracy theory like, oh yeah, CIA killed Kennedy. That's normal now. Epstein. So probably the biggest scandal in modern history of, this huge child trafficking scheme all over the world, including world leaders, everything from Donald Trump to Bill Gates to all of the biggest names. The director for the CIA that just came out recently too. At the time, met with Epstein, I think 3 times minimum after he was convicted of all of his crimes. So that's a pretty big deal. But nowadays, that's just another news story, another day, and we move on to something else. And so, I guess kind of the point there is that things are a little crazier than they have been in previous times. Lots of stuff's going down, and there's a lot of corruption involved at many different levels. So, with the parallel society, the idea is that we operate more outside of the system. We want to minimize our participation in the system, because if we say the system is corrupt, the system is immoral, there are all these problems, well, I don't really want to be a part of that. So I want to minimize my participation with that. I also want to minimize my support of that. So think of something like taxes. Taxes is one of those evils that, for the most part, most people can't get away from. But what does your tax money go to? It goes to fund this very same system. And so that's something that personally I don't want to support. I don't want to participate in it. And so this is a strategy that can give us a way of doing that. It's also a non-political strategy, and it's a strategy that involves direct participation. So when you involve yourselves in the political sphere, you are basically subbing out this job of having influence in society to someone else. You're casting a vote, you're relying on a representative, you're kind of pushing that responsibility onto somebody else. Not necessarily bad, there are ways that works, but this approach is direct action, that you do X, Y, Z. So for sticking with some biblical examples here, you've got the idea of Jesus talking about helping other people. That was one of the main things that he talked about. And it wasn't that you give money to the Romans, and the Romans have this welfare system, and they're going to take care of the poor. No, it was you help others. Good Samaritan, good example of that. So that direct action approach is one that's been going on for a long time, very effective. For some historical examples, the church would be, I guess, probably the most obvious one, where if you look back to the time period of Jesus and the disciples, the New Testament, you had this Christian church that was new and in its beginning phases. It existed in a time when they had a lot of disagreements with modern culture for them. They did not really agree with Roman culture in a lot of ways. It was very libertine and a lot of other things going on there. The Roman state, the Roman Empire, was not exactly in line with Christian thinking. And they even had lots of issues with institutional religion. So a lot of these systems that these very early Christians were surrounded by and involved in, they didn't agree with. They didn't really want to participate. They didn't really want to support. So what did they do? Well, they actually had their own court system. They educated their own children. They had their own welfare system, to the point where there are records and letters of people higher up in the Roman hierarchy that were complaining that the Christian church was doing such a good job at taking care of poor Roman citizens that it was making Rome look bad. So they were very effective at what they were doing, but they did it in this parallel society approach. They had their own systems, their own things that they did, and then what happened? You could argue that there's a lot of things that happened in the church. It had itself in its down, splits, all kinds of stuff, but it is the thing that had the absolute most impact on all of Western society. I mean, a few hundred years later, Christianity basically ruled the Western world. And so, when we talk about effective, that is very effective. Now, another really good historical example would be Charter 77. So this is something that started in Czechoslovakia under the communist regime that's going on there. Two of the main folks that were involved, Václav Benda and Václav Havel. These two folks, one of them, Benda, coined the term the parallel polis. And that's basically this idea of the parallel society. The other one, Václav Havel, he ended up being the president of Czechoslovakia after the communist regime fell, and then when it changed to the Republic of Czechoslovakia, he was also the first president of that. So very successful guy, ran the country, and did a lot of things after all of this writing that they both did. They were dissidents, along with a whole group of other folks under this totalitarian regime. They were the resistance. And what they felt that the best way of approaching this was they called it the parallel polis, the parallel society. They educated their own children outside of the communist system. They bartered with one another. They tried to be as self-sufficient as possible. And this was a strategy that worked very well. There are a lot of historians that credit the gray markets, the counter-economy, all of these things going on under the Soviet regime and in various communist dictatorships, that they say that these counter-economies were one of the main reasons why those things did not work and ended up falling. Probably not of issues with communism and totalitarianism, but one of the things that can be effective against a system like that is to have a parallel society. One of the things that Václav Havel talked about was that systems and ideologies largely are corrupt or become corrupt. And so he warned of getting involved with the systems. And that could be politics, that could be other things. There's so many systems that we're surrounded by. The education system, the food system, the healthcare system, and these involve every society out there. So systems can have their issues, but ideologies as well. People can get really latched on to a certain ideology, go gung-ho into it, and that can lead to corruption. That can be steered in a way that it originally was not intended to be. You can have good people get involved in things that go bad. That happens. And so what he was saying was that regardless of what you look at, whether it's systems or ideologies or movements or capitalism versus communism, these things, there's always these two sides. You have Democrats versus Republicans, you have capitalism versus communism. You have folks that are all about warfare, and then people that are all about peace, both saying that they're trying to achieve the same goals. No matter what you're doing, you have these two sides. And one of the points to this is that it doesn't really matter which side you go for. In general, they all lead to the same place. So he was writing under a communist system and said that both communism and capitalism lead to totalitarianism. And we've seen that despite how much I like the idea of a free market and true capitalism, I would say that we have some pretty good evidence that in modern America, there are plenty of examples of corruption with that, where you have corporations that basically control politicians that basically run the country. And same thing occurs when you have a communist system, just about any system. And that is the point, that the system does a thing and goes in a certain direction and ends up in a certain place. I think probably most of us in this room know a teacher, or two, or three, or more, or maybe you are a teacher and been a teacher. There are plenty of very good people locally that are teachers. But I guess one of the big issues is that the education system has a lot of issues. There are a lot of problems with the modern education system. And so even though you can have good people, good intentions, doing good things, oftentimes you have a system that in and of itself is corrupted, that it leads to end results that are not really what we're going for. So when you look at some modern examples of this idea of the parallel society, I was looking up, I was going to do some quotes, I decided not to, but for Václav Havel and Václav Benda, this idea of parallel polis, surprisingly enough, one of the first articles that pulled up when I was doing some research on this was from the New Yorker, and this is a very left-leaning organization and article and writer. And so what they were saying was that this idea of the parallel polis could be a refuge for those that are seeking to escape the hate of the era of Donald Trump. Shortly after Donald Trump got elected president, and a lot of people were very upset about that on the left, and they said, hey, this is a way for us to cope, for us to get over this, for us to continue on, because they felt like the world was in it. You have the exact same thing, again, on the other side, where you have people that saw maybe something like COVID and all of the regulations, the mask battles, the shop battles, all of the various things, lockdowns, all of these things. And plenty of people ended up turning to this idea of the parallel society. Things like mutual assistance groups, PMAs, I'll mention later. Things of this nature where they felt that there were a lot of issues going on and that it was better to step aside and build something better. And that is something that, again, used on the left, used on the right. It's not a left-right thing. And that's the point, is whether you're left or right. If you're talking about, let's say for a government example, statism, using the state, having the government do things for a society, yes, the left's going to do it one way and the right's going to do it the other way. But guess what? Every president that we've had, whether it's left or right, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, just about every time, they spend more money, they get us into more wars, they increase the size of government. So even though you might steer a little left and you steer a little right on a road, roads still go in the same place. So, although I would agree, personally, that I might lean more towards one side than the other, and I like the direction of one side than the other, I don't like where the road goes. And so, the parallel society is this idea of having another option. There is another road. Going back to the idea of a biblical example, you've got the imagery of a wide path, a wide road that's easy to walk down, and this narrow road, a narrow gate that is hard, difficult. The hard one and the difficult one is usually the right one to go. Biblical. It is the right one to go. And even though the other looks easy and it looks nice and everybody's doing this thing, definitely doesn't mean it is the right thing to do or a good thing to do. And so, with a parallel society, it is something that is very practical, it's something that's very effective, and it's very efficient. Something we could all do. It's not all that difficult, I don't think, for any of us, to take a day, once a month, and meet up with, let's say, the Chattanooga Voluntary Society, go to a meeting, meet some like-minded folks, or start up or go to a mutual assistance group somewhere in your local area and take it, even one night a week, but definitely one night a month, something. Is it that big of a deal to spend $100 on some backup food? Or when you go buy food next time, we're not just buying a little bit extra. Surely, it's not that big of a deal if you're buying, say, a few cans of beans. You buy 4 cans of beans instead of 2 and put 2 in the pantry. And you can slowly build up. These are things that they're very practical. They're very doable. It's not out of reach. It's nothing crazy. You don't have to go overboard. You don't have to drop $10,000 on some emergency preparedness kit and all these things. These are things that we can do, and they're natural. For thousands of years, this is the way societies operate. That they operate interpersonally with one another through relationships and knowing one another, taking care of one another. This used to be a very normal thing. When we get to food, it used to be really normal that your cows were out on a pasture eating grass, and then you eat the cows, and they're healthy. You drink the milk, and it's healthy. That was very normal. To put cows on concrete, which I guess back then would have been like a giant slab of rock, would not have made a lot of sense to people 1,000 years ago. Doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? That's what we do now. We do things very differently. But the solutions are simple. That's a quote of who it is, but it's that the problems of society are more and more complex, but the solutions are more and more simple. It's a very simple thing. So another advantage of a parallel society approach, despite being practical, efficient, effective, all of these things, let's say in one category, that is a good way of doing things, an effective way of doing things. Another thing is that it's a moral way of doing things. So if you think that there might be some immoral aspects of modern society, you have some morality issues with the way culture is headed, or the way politics is dealt with, or the way the food system or healthcare system is handled, then you make your own choice on your own morality and how you choose to handle these things. But personally, I don't really want to be involved in things that I feel are immoral. That's not something I have an interest in doing. I don't want to participate in immoral activity. I don't want to fund it. I don't want to be a part of it. And so, even if a parallel society approach was not effective, not efficient, it's not practical, at least it can be the right thing to do. And all the better that it actually is something that works, is effective, and efficient, and practical. You can do it. So, there are a lot of advantages here. There are also better results, arguably, with using a parallel society approach versus some of the other examples that I used before. So, this could be conditional, but you have an individual level that we're all concerned with. We definitely want a good life for ourselves, and we want to be able to take care of ourselves. We also want to take care of our families and those that we care about. We also want something better for our community, for other people, the others of the world. And a parallel society approach can be a very effective way of achieving all of those things. So, for example, if I believe that the way food is raised these days is not a good thing, there are some issues with it, I could try to pose some sort of regulatory change where I'm going to mandate that cows must be put out on pasture and eat grass. That is the only way that you're allowed to raise cows there. Now, number one, that is limited to one small aspect of all the problems of our food system. Number two, there's going to be a million loopholes that people get around it, and it's going to have all its own issues. But you could argue, hey, you made incremental change for the better. Sure. Another option, I find somebody that raises beef cattle the way I believe is right. Pasture-raised beef. I could go to Kent. I could go to, there's other people probably having booths that are out there you can see this afternoon that have these kinds of things. I go to the Agora Food Club. You could go somewhere where you know that farmer is raising the cow the way that you believe is right for an animal to be raised in a healthy way that you can then eat. You do that, then you actually, for yourself, are eating truly healthy food, and you are supporting a local farmer that is doing this in a way that you believe is right, is healthy, is natural, is good. And so you're supporting them directly as an individual. You are getting the healthy food as an individual. And so that's a really good result. What about your family that you're feeding? Extremely good result for them. What about the fact that you're supporting a local farmer who can now continue to farm, who can continue to have more cattle, who can continue to raise things in this way and support themselves? Well, that's better for the community. Because if so-and-so, let's say John, wants to have pasture-raised beef, but there's nowhere around here to get it because no one would buy it, and no one would support farmers who did it that way, then John doesn't have any options. Or he's going to have to, spend a lot more money, go a lot further way to do it. So if we can support things that are more moral, more effective, more efficient, this parallel society approach, we can have these options that are arguably better. But we have to do something. We have to support this. We have to build out these systems in order for them to exist. And so if you're telling somebody that maybe organic food and pasture-raised meat and raw milk, these kinds of things, they're really good for you. This is the way you need to eat. This is a healthy way of doing things. This is the diet you should have, proper nutrition, on and on and on. Well, it doesn't really do someone any good if they have nowhere to get it. Or if they don't have the money to go to Whole Foods and spend some ridiculous amount of money for groceries. So we need to have these options, and either they exist and we should be supporting them, or they don't and we should be making them. And that is what creates the parallel society. So for some more practical, current examples, let's go through some of these systems that you might think has some problems in modern society. How about the food system? What's a solution for that? Well, homesteading, growing your own food, having a small organic garden in your backyard so you can grow your own vegetables. That's one of the biggest things that gets sprayed and have a lot of poison on them. So that's a really good option. How about frequenting a farmer's market or a food club or getting food directly from a farmer? You're supporting and building these things that you believe in that are good things. There are some other systems. How about the education system? Has a lot of issues. Homeschool is one of the most popular. It's a huge homeschooling group in Chattanooga, or not a single group. There are many large homeschooling groups in the greater Chattanooga area. All around the country, it is a very popular thing now. It's not some random, isolated, crazy thing people do, like it might have been considered a few decades ago. Now, that is a perfectly normal thing you can get plugged into, and you can pull your kids out of a system that you might not agree with. You might be teaching them things that you don't want your children to be taught. That's an option. You've also got a learning mindset that us as adults, grown people, most people, kids as well. But if you have this learning mindset of always trying to learn more, then that is one of the most crucial aspects of educating yourself. And, by extension, your family, people you know, these kinds of things. So if I just relied on my public school education and a college degree, and then, I'm done learning, I continue to learn. You've got podcasts, you've got articles, you've got books, you've got like-minded people. You've got lots of things that you can learn from, and I guarantee you still have things to learn. We all do. We don't know it all. And so having this mindset, learning more and more and more, can not only be something to combat a corrupted education system, or lacking education system at the very least, it can also make up for the effects of a corrupted education system or lacking education system. Money. A lot of issues with money. I have a feeling probably you folks in here have gone down the rabbit hole of the Federal Reserve System and inflation, like Brad mentioned, lots and lots and lots of issues. So there are options there. Very, very simple one would be cash. If you're using cash, then number one, someone's not tracking you and tracing you on everything you do. Number two, we could say that you're responsible for maybe your own reporting on things like taxation and things of that sort. You could have this benefit of not having your money locked up in a bank. That might be a corporation that has views that you do not hold. That might be an institution that might enforce things that you do not agree with. If you look at the protests in Canada a while ago, where people had their bank accounts frozen, no access to their money, because they had views that people didn't agree with. And that wasn't allowed. So they had no access to their money. You have cash. Granted, someone can come to your house and begin to take it from you. Sure. But in the 99% of cases, you're fine. You got your money, you can use it. You've got more extreme examples of things like cryptocurrency, where you have money that is outside of this fiat money system. Lots of options there. Things like Bitcoin, but it goes on and on. Privacy coins, things like that. We will have a booth out there, someone will be manning. And if you're interested in cryptocurrency, talk to him. We can tell you all about it. Another example for money would just be self-sufficiency in general. So part of it is how much money you have to spend. If I am not having to deal with dollars as much as I once was, then that means I'm not holding as many dollars. That means if inflation goes through the roof, I'm not losing as much value as I would have. So if I have $100,000 in the bank and we have 10% inflation, that's a pretty big chunk that gets taken out of it. Whereas if I have $10,000 in the bank, and I'm largely using my money, growing my own food, investing my time, bartering with one another, things of this nature, then I have a much smaller chunk. That might get eaten away, that value gets taken away by inflation, things like that. Maybe the bank locks it up, so be it. But it's a much smaller amount. That makes me less reliant on that system. That makes me less a victim to a lot of negative things involved in it. You've also got technology. So probably a lot of people have different issues with different aspects, whether it's big tech or privacy concerns or AI or on and on and on. With technology, you can do the same things. You can limit your exposure. You can be more involved with some more privacy-centric options. So maybe instead of using a Gmail email account, you use something like Proton Mail or another encrypted email option, so that you're just not feeding the algorithm and giving all your data to big tech and they do whatever they do with it. There are lots of different options here, especially with kids, but for us adults as well. Screen time is something that can have a lot of negative effects. There's another rabbit hole you can go down, but just limiting your exposure to that means you're seeing less advertisements. You're being fed less specific intentional information meant to persuade you in some way or another, probably a way that you originally would not intend it. You are supporting these technologies and companies less if you have less involvement with them. So there are all kinds of things that are benefits of not involving yourself in these aspects of whether it be technology, food, corporations, money, all of these things. Again, like self-sufficiency. If I normally went to Walmart, and I don't, but if I did, let's say I go to Walmart every week and I buy groceries and grilling supplies and whatnot, so who knows what I get at Walmart. I get all that stuff. Well, what if I start bartering with somebody that makes homemade soap? What if I start getting some other products? Maybe make them laundry detergent. Really good things you can do. They're actually much easier to make. If you start doing that, what does that mean? That means you are providing goes down. Everybody's out of power for 2 weeks. And what are people going to do? Well, they're going to go to Longbrook. They're going to get as much as they can get, everything that they probably should have had home. No. And so, if I have some of those things at home, I'm providing a lot of those things, I have a group of people I'm connected with that have those things, then I'm less reliant on them. And that can be a really good thing. I'm not going to be as easy to be manipulated, pressured into something, or anything of that sort, because it's not something that I am relying on, because I have these other sources and other options. So, I guess the final thing that I want to bring up here is in my opinion, best local example, which would be the Agora. And that would be the host of Agora Fest, hence the name. And with the Agora, the idea was that, I guess kind of playing off the name, let's go that way. You've got the Agora in the historical sense of in a Greek city, the Agora was the center of town. That was the marketplace. That's where philosophers met and talked. That's where people would meet together. And you had this sense of community, and you would meet up with folks that you didn't know. You would also meet up with family members and friends, and that would be the gathering place. So it was the center of town for all these things. That is the idea of the local Agora as well, the hub for these things. It's also the word where agorism comes from. If you haven't heard of agorism, it's all about operating outside of the system. And so, perfect. So if you have a hub for operating outside of the system, that's what the Agora gets. The actual Agora here is located on Pivx D7ziutb5gGNnJ5pXngwa3w9zJj2P1iNzUT up the road, not too far away. And it is something that we set up as a church. And so if you go back to the idea of the early church, what did they do? Well, they had this Christian community of people that would study the Bible, they would pray together, they would take care of each other, and they knew one another, built this community, and they had their own systems, their own things. That's the idea. So, one aspect of how this is structured, and I want to talk a little bit about structure from a parallel society approach, because that's a big deal. So, like for a church, most churches would be a 501c3, a nonprofit that is incorporated with the state, and that's how most of them are set up. And with that, they get a piece of paper that says all your donations can be written on taxes, and it's good for people to give money to churches. And they can guarantee, you can write this off. However, there is also the option of 508c1a. So in the IRS tax code, and code 508c1a, simply says that churches are accepted from the requirements of reporting to the federal government, basically asking them to exist, because that's what 501c3 has to do. You have to file some paperwork, and they say, yes, you may exist. File more paperwork. Yes, you may be tax exempt. You're getting this permission, so you're incorporated with the state. The way we set it up was 501c1a, which is right there in tax code, not illegal, not anything like that. It just says that the church is automatically accepted from these things. So we are. We don't have a fancy piece of paper, though, that says, hey, if you donate money to us, you get right off from taxes. You still can, but we don't have a piece of paper that proves it from the state. So there are disadvantages, but we feel it is better to be as separate as possible from these systems that we don't agree with. Another example would be the food club at the Agora. So we wanted a place where people could get natural, healthy, local food. And we wanted to support people that do things that way. Local farmers, local producers. And so we set up the Agora Food Club as an extension of the Agora. And with that, we set that up in a few specific ways. Because legally, there are some challenges. You are not actually allowed to often sell food that comes directly from farm. So, like if somebody, let's say Kenton has a cow, he processes it on site, he would not be allowed to sell that to the beef. Let's say someone goes out at dairy, they milk the cow, they can't just sell that at milk. They have to go through all the licenses, the regulations, pasteurize the milk, they have to have their special USDA stamp, on all the meat that they process, and on and on and on and on. So, due to that and many other reasons, we set ourselves up and structured in a way that allows us to operate outside of the system in ways that we feel is best. So, first of all, we are a PMA, Private Membership Association. Again, this extends way beyond the Agora, that's just my example here. Kenton's got a PMA. The sponsor that we have as well, at least Louise, that runs that portion of it. She has a PMA. There are multiple people that do. It's a thing. It's a way that you can set up various structures. But what it is a private membership association. And the main point here is that it is for members only, and it is in the private sphere. So if you think about it, if I have one of you over to my house, and I pour a glass of wine, I can do that. We can have wine over dinner, and I don't need a liquor license. I don't need permission. I don't need a report. I am not going to have some inspector come into my house and test the temperature of my fridge and freezer before I can serve you dinner. This is my house. It's private sphere. And so the idea with the PMA, Private Membership Association, is you expand that out to an association of people that do things privately. And as such, they're not involved in the public sphere and not involved, largely, in public regulation either. So lots of advantages there. And that is how we decided to set up. The other aspect of the food club that was a structure that we felt was very beneficial, that lots of other people implemented as well, is to be a food club model. And that has a very specific structure. So if you sign up at the Agora Food Club, you become a member, you sign a contract, basically say you're not going to sue us, and that we are operating in the private sphere. Now you and everybody else in the association. In addition to that, every member funds an account. And so you as a member have an account for food. Every other member does too. So the food club, the association, has these funds that are from all of the members that all pitch in together. And then we go out each week to local farms. We do some bulk orders. We do things like that. We gather up this natural, healthy, mostly local food, bring it all in-house to one place, and then food club members can come and get what they want. Now, with this model, when you come and get what you want, you're not buying anything. If you hadn't figured out, you already paid for it. You already put in, let's say, $100 in your account. You own $100 worth of these stuff in the food club. So when you come in and get your stuff, we charge a service fee for the service of going and getting it, paying for gas, utilities, things of this nature. Think of a Grubhub model, where if you order food online and some company like Grubhub goes out, gets it, and brings it back to you, they're not buying the food that you order and then marking it up and reselling it to you. It's not the way that works. They just charge you a fee for going to get it. You're the one that paid for it, you bring it back. That's it. So the food club model is a very similar model, where people fund their account, we get local healthy food, we support local farmers, bring it all in-house, you come pick up your stuff, there's a service fee attached to that, and done. And one of the biggest advantages here for us as a food club, but also other business structures as well, is that there is a large difference in regulation between services and goods, especially food and health-related goods. So if I provide the service of getting you food, that's all I'm doing, then I am not under the raw milk regulation. I'm not allowed to sell raw milk, because I don't sell raw milk. I don't need a special stamp on a pound of ground beef. I'm not selling the ground beef. The vast majority of regulation kicks in on the sale. And when you avoid the sale, you avoid a lot of that regulation. In addition to being private sphere, being outside most of that anyway. And so the point of all of this would be that you can apply this parallel society approach, not just to you and your community, to your friends, to being prepared in case things go bad or when things go bad. You can apply it to a business. You can apply it to lots of different things. You can apply it to structure. You can apply it to how you're going to influence society, make the world a better place. Whatever you're trying to do, whatever your goals are in life, whatever you participate in, the parallel society approach is a method, it's a strategy that you can do. Now, with the Agora, other things that we're planning on doing to expand this idea out would be to do classes and workshops, to do things like tours and education, have a homeschool co-op, things of this nature. So the idea is to build the parallel society. And that's what we're trying to do locally. There are lots of other places around here that are trying to do this similar thing. some sort of mandate where you need a digital ID in order to enter stores. That's something that has been floated and used in some countries around the world. Put that in here and say you don't want a digital ID. You don't want to be involved in a digital wallet, digital this, that, and the other. Maybe it's a medical thing. A lot of people are not interested in getting the shot, COVID happened, or masks, or whatever the issue is. So there are mandates that come after that. You can't enter a normal store. You can't go to a normal hospital. What are you going to do? Well, when the parallel society exists, you have an option. You've got somewhere you can go and get food. You've got people you know. I personally, we have people we know who are ER doctors, who are nurses, who are teachers, who are farmers, who are all of these different things. And so, when we hit a point in our society where there's a line we don't want to cross, we're no longer going to have to give in because we have another option. And it is extremely important. Now is the time to be aware that there should be another option. Because if it waits, and it's not there, then it's not there. And that would be a good time, the way modern society is, to decide where is your line? How far will you go? What are things you're not interested in taking part in? What will you not go beyond? Make that line on the sand now. You know where it is. Start taking steps. Crawl, walk, run. Take steps to have options so that if you have to get to that point, you're able to make that stand and not give in to something that you don't want to do. Not be demoralized in either sense of the word. And that is something that we want to encourage with Agora Fest as a whole, is to spread these ideas, to introduce you to people that are doing these things, to encourage you, to give you connections, network, all of these things so that the parallel society is not just this idea. It's not just a conceptual thing. It's not an intellectual endeavor. It's something that actually exists and you can actually do. And so, final thing would be that there are dangers that do exist. Fear, one of the big ones. Most people act out of fear. If they're scared of something, they will give up freedoms. They will give up money. They will give up information. Give up lots of things if they're scared. Well, if you are reliant on a system, on a job, on a thing, and you're threatened with that being taken away from you, that fear can cause you to go beyond that line that you did not want to cross. You've got convenience. Very dangerous. There are lots of things in this world that are easy. And there are more and more every single day. It is a lot easier to take the easy road. And if you give in to that, the further you give in to that, the worse it can be and the harder it is to get out of it. Do not live according to convenience. It doesn't mean that all convenience is bad. But convenience is a danger that you do have to look out for. Because usually, the right thing, effective thing, definitely in this context of the way that we are thinking, we are doing things, convenient thing is usually not doing it. And so, what you want to do is make sure that you do not fall into that trap of just doing what's easy, just doing what's convenient. I don't want to do that because it's hard. Because I'm going to have to take an hour out of my day. I'm busy. I'm busy too. Might even be busier than you. There's a lot of stuff going on. So does everybody else. So don't let that be something that holds you back from doing something that you feel you should do. The final thing would be words without means. That is something that, especially look like libertarian circles, are very guilty of this. Lots of circles are. Where there's a lot you can talk about. A lot of ideas. These things sound really cool. So, hey, I want to grow my own food. Hey, I like the idea of homesteading. You know, natural, healthy food. I want to eat healthy. That's great. Well, sure, great. But if you're not actually doing it, it doesn't do you any good. Or anybody else. And so, not only are these good ideas, not only are these options, but you gotta actually do something. Take action, there's a further step. Because words without deeds are empty. So, that is the challenge for all of you today. Find a way that you can plug in. Find a way that you can get connected. Find a way that you can take that step. You're already crawling, start walking. You're already walking, start running. You're already running, keep running. There is always more you can
So that was presentation number 2 from Agora Fest 2023 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was myself giving the presentation. I was one of the presenters out of 5, I believe. So we have 3 more presentations to do. That'll be the next 3 episodes of this podcast. And I do promise the audio does get better. I can't remember. The next one might also be bad, but I don't think as bad as this one and the one from the last episode. But they do, I believe it's the last 2 that are actually pretty good quality. So I know it can be a little rough to listen when it's hard to understand and hear at parts, and there are changes in the audio level and all these things. Again, I did work very hard trying to get this listenable, but again, there's only so much I can do, so I am sorry for that. But we will get to some better audio quality. I still do believe that it's worth listening to these presentations, that they have really good content and they're worth listening to. And again, the last few will be much better, and then we'll get back to the normal podcast. We'll get back to the Beatitudes, finish those up, get into the Sermon on the Mount, and continue on with our study for our Foundations podcast. And I also want to say thank you very much for those that are listening, that are just dedicated people and participating, those that are giving money financially and supporting the show via mostly Patreon, and those that have given me feedback and left reviews and ratings. All of those things are super helpful. I really appreciate it, especially given that the past few months have been a little hit and miss with me actually staying on schedule with the episodes. I feel like for 2 or 3 years I was on point every single episode, almost every time. I think I missed 1 in like 3 years, but then the past few months have been a little rough, and I've explained that in the past. I don't really need to get into it, but point is, I really appreciate your patience and that you are here and listening and supporting in all these ways. Thank you very much. We'll be back next time with the next presentation. It will be, I believe, about sustainability and off-grid living from someone who has a lot of experience doing those things. So that will be next episode. I hope you come back and enjoy that one as well. Until then, I'm out. Peace.
This has been our Foundations podcast. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.